Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings and FanDuel MLB video for Thursday, June 30th. We have an 8-game night slate that's going on tonight. I think it's an 11-game slate overall, 3 games starting in the afternoon. We're going to concentrate on the 8 games that start at 7 o'clock tonight for the late slate. What we like to do here in the Benny's Bat section is we take a look at each pitcher that's on the mound, try to figure out what their weaknesses are, and then figure out which bats profile to do the best against them. So let's start right at the top. The first game we're going to talk about, we got Miami going up against Atlanta. Wei-Yin Chen is on the mound for Miami. He's a left-handed pitcher. Right-handed bats have a higher average, more home runs against them. He's given up about a home run in the last 2 years. He's given up about a home run every 6 innings to right-handed bats. Now, the problem that we have here is Atlanta is very bad against left-handed pitching. They really don't have a lot of big right-handed bats in that lineup. You're probably going to see a guy like maybe Jeff Francoeur hitting cleanup. Tyler Flowers, maybe Adonis Garcia. Not really a lot of guys that are going to scare you. Usually they throw 4 or 5 lefties up there in the top 5 or 6 of the order. So like I said, I think this is a pretty good spot here for Chen. He's pretty cheap going all over the place. I'm not looking at any of the Atlanta bats. This Atlanta team has been historically bad against left-handed pitching this year. So I do think that Chen makes for a nice salary saver. And as far as the bats, like I said, Francoeur is probably the best one, but he's not somebody that I ever really play. So I'm not really looking at any of the bats on Atlanta today. On the other side of this game, we got Mike Folty-Newitz coming back. He's been very bad against left-handed pitching, especially in 2015. This year he's been a little bit better, but left-handers still the way you want to attack him. So when you look at that Marlins team, guys like Derek Dietrich, 376 WOBA, 194 ISO. Guys like Justin Bour, 365 WOBA, big 260 ISO, a lot of power against right-handed pitching. A guy like Christian Yelich, 368 WOBA, 151 ISO, very solid hitter hitting in the 3 spot of that order. All these lefties make a little bit of sense for me. I wouldn't mind stacking guys up against Folty-Newitz either. So if you want to throw in like an Ozuna or a Stanton in there too as well for the stack, I wouldn't be opposed to that either. But you definitely want to have some left-handed exposure against Folty. The next game we're going to talk about, Kansas City going up against St. Louis. We got Chris Young, the big right-hander, on the mound. Left-handed bats tend to do a lot better against him. He's a little bit tough on right-handed bats. He does have a very high fly ball rate, though, which does turn into a lot of home runs. The guy who stands out the most to me is Matt Carpenter. Love Matt Carpenter today. Don't love the price, though. He's like $5,500, $5,600, which is very expensive. But this is a guy that absolutely kills right-handed pitching, does have some home run pop. 409 WOBA for him, 274 ISO. You guys all know I love Matt Carpenter, one of my favorite players in all of baseball. One of the solidest bats there, one of the best cash game plays from the top of that order for St. Louis. And I do think he also has some upside today because, like I said, he is a guy that has some home run pop, and Chris Young does give up a ton of fly balls. So I do think that Carpenter's in a good spot here. I also think you can look at the other lefties. There's basically only 2 other lefties they roll out there. Matt Adams and Brandon Moss. If either or both of them are in the lineup, they both are kind of interesting to me today as well. And then I also think on the right-handed side, you could look at a guy like Matt Holliday. Holliday does really well in righty-on-righty matchups, 356 WOBA, 175 ISO, another guy with some home run power. So I wouldn't mind using him against Chris Young as a right-handed bat as well. On the other side of this game, we got Mike Leake pitching. Left-handed bats have a higher average against him, but he is a guy with a low fly ball rate, gets a lot of ground balls. Looking at that KC team, guys like Eric Hosmer make a little bit of sense to me. He's a 390 WOBA guy against right-handed pitching. Kendrys Morales has actually snapped out of the funk that he was in for most of the season. He's been hot lately. I think he had like 4 hits yesterday. He's had a couple multi-hit games in the last week. So he's somebody else that we got to look at. And then Alex Gordon, who just came off the DL, still pretty cheap. Another left-handed bat that's been hitting up towards the top of the order. Without Lorenzo Cain in there now, I think these lefties are going to be prominent. These are the guys that you really want to look at. I do think Leake has a decent matchup here. I think he'll do okay, but I think he's going to struggle with the middle of that order when he has to face all these left-handed bats. Next game we can talk about, we got San Francisco Giants going up against the Oakland Athletics. Madison Bumgarner on the mound for the Giants. One of my favorite pitchers in the league. 199 ERA for him right now. Whip of 1.02, 122 strikeouts in 109 innings. if you're looking at that Oakland team, I don't really want to take too many bats against Bumgarner. He's a very good pitcher, but Oakland does have a couple guys that hit left-handed pitching extremely well. Danny Valencia basically made his career by hitting left-handed pitching. 396 WOBA for him, 214 ISO score, so he makes a little bit of sense. You got a guy like Marcus Semien, 383 WOBA, 211 ISO. Guys like Fagley and Jed Lowry hit left-handed pitching well too, but like I said, I mean, Bumgarner's one of the better left-handed pitchers we have in the league, so he's not really somebody that I'm looking to actively take bats against. He's actually one of my favorite pitchers that's on the mound today. The only problem you have is the price. $13,000 is a little bit pricey for him, but again, he's been paying it off. He's been putting up, 30-plus fantasy points, getting 8 to 10 strikeouts, going 7 or 8 innings into games, and, limiting the damage on the other team to only 1 or 2 runs, as evidenced by the fact that his whip is 1.02 and his ERA is under 2. On the other side of that game, we got Dylan Overton, the lefty, and this is an interesting spot. It's his second start in the major leagues after coming up from AAA. Right-handed bats are the way you want to go after him according to his minor league numbers. San Francisco's not really all that good right now against left-handed pitching. A lot of their right-handed bats are hurt. You got guys like Pence, you got guys like Duffy. These guys are all on the DL, so they've been rolling out like 5 or 6 lefties towards the top of that order. You got Denard Span, you got Panic, you got Belt, you got Crawford hitting in like the 5-hole lately. Really the only right-handed bat there, and the guy profiles the best, 181 ISO score. Lefty matchups with a 360 WOBA. But like I said, outside of those guys, it's not really a lineup that has been crushing left-handed pitching, at least not that are on. So I do think that, this is going to be a low-scoring game. I mean, I could see Bumgarner probably winning this game, but I think it's going to be like a 4-2, 3-2 kind of game at the end here. So I don't hate Posey's the guy I want to have some exposure to. I don't really hate Belt, but like I said, you really want right-handed bats to attack him. The next game we can talk about, Baltimore at Seattle, and this one's kind of interesting. You got Chris Tillman on the mound. He got lit up in his last 2 games, so he's not pitching as well as he was earlier in the year. Left-handed bats are the ones that have a higher average against them, but right-handed bats are the ones that seem to tag him for more home runs over the course of the last couple seasons. So I think that puts a guy like Robinson Cano in play, a high-average left-handed bat. 377 WOBA, 218 ISO for him. He's actually 14 of 34 lifetime with 2 home runs against Tillman. So that's a pretty significant sample size. And he's hitting over 400 against him. So I definitely think Cano is in a good spot today. And then, like I said, the right-handed bats are the ones that have been hitting the home runs off him. So you can look at some of those right-handed power bats on Seattle as well. Guy like Nelson Cruz, 364 WOBA, 224 ISO, and righty-on-righty matchups. Only 3 of 14 lifetime against Tillman, but he has hit 2 home runs off him. So that's why we said the average is higher for the lefties, but the right-handers have some home runs off him. Cruz, more of a tournament play for me. Definitely wouldn't use him in cash here today. But again, if he gets a hold of one, there's a good chance he's going to hit a home run. Dae-Ho Lee, the first baseman, is another guy who's in that same boat. Has a lot of pop in his bat, 367 WOBA, 203 ISO, and righty-on-righty matchups. So him and Cruz are the 2 guys I would look at for tournaments for upside. Cano, I think you can use as a tournament or a cash game option. I think he's just really solid. And, like I said, Tillman gives up a higher average to left-handed bats, so it makes some sense to look Cano's way. On the other side of this game, we got Taijuan Walker. And this is a tough one for me because Walker's been great at home, and he's been very good in 2016. He does have a high fly ball rate, which is actually why he's so good at home. You'll see if you look at his numbers that, at home, he's got a lower batting average and less home runs allowed because Seattle's a place where fly balls kind of go to die. When he goes on the road, that's when he tends to give up more of his home runs, which is why his road ERA and road batting average are so much higher because some of those fly balls wind up turning into home runs, and then he's, giving up 2-run and 3-run shots, and that's where he really gets himself in trouble. Normally, I would love Walker, but the problem I have with him today is he's also got a little bit of an injury situation going on. He did something to his foot. He threw a bullpen session. I think he skipped the start, but they're saying that he's fine and there's nothing to worry about here. So whenever I hear them say there's nothing to worry about, that's usually when I know there's something to worry about. So that's why I'm a little bit on the fence about him here. Right-handed bats do have a higher average against them and more home runs, so he is kind of a reverse splits pitcher over the last 2 years. I'm looking at this team. I mean, I like Chris Davis against right-handed pitching, 398 WOBA, 325 ISO. He does have that home run upside against the high fly ball pitcher, so he's somebody I'd look at. Trumbo is another guy, home run upside, against a fly ball pitcher. I guess Manny Machado, even though he hasn't done well against Walker in his lifetime, I think I'd prefer to go with guys like Trumbo and Davis. But I'm not going to argue anybody who wants Manny in there either, because he is good in righty-on-righty situations. So if you can get him in there in a righty-on-righty situation, I think he's another guy that you want to have some exposure to. Although, like I said, so far lifetime, I think he's like 1 of 8 or 1 of 9 against Walker. So it's not really good stats so far. Next game we're going to talk about, we got Cincinnati against Washington. Pair of left-handers on the mound here, so I think we want all the right-handed bats in this game. Gio Gonzalez is pitching for Washington. He's given up 36 runs now in his last 7 starts, with at least 3 runs in each one of those starts. Right-handed bats, higher average and more home runs against them. So you're looking at that Cincinnati team, guys like Zach Cozart stand out, 390 WOBA, 200-plus ISO score. Eugenio Suarez has really good numbers against left-handed pitching. Adam Duvall, big right-handed power bat that can go yard against them, so I think he's in play too. And then even Joey Votto I'd look at. Lefty-on-lefty situations, his WOBA is just a tad under 400. ISO score just a tad under 200, so he's still a really, really solid hitter even in lefty-on-lefty matchups. So I do like the Cincinnati team today. I think they put up some runs against Gio, and like I said, I mean, Gio's been giving up an average of over 5 runs during his last 7 starts, and he hasn't given up less than 3 runs in any of them. So there's definitely going to be a couple runs scored here by the Cincinnati team. On the other side of this game, left-handed Brandon Finnegan going up for Cincinnati against Washington. He's actually been really good in 3 of his last 4 starts, so I think people are going to look his way. But the 3 starts that he did really well in were against Atlanta, who's historically bad against left-handed pitching, St. Louis, who has been struggling with left-handed pitching all year, and San Diego, who, even though they actually hit lefties decently well, much better than they hit righties, still not a very good lineup top to bottom. So, I wanted you to just take the recent stats with him with a grain of salt, because I do think that this is a much tougher matchup. Right-handed bats the way you want to go after him. Ryan Zimmerman, and Jason Worth are 2 guys with like 390 WOBAs and over 200 ISO scores against left-handed pitching. So they're both in play for me today. Wilson Ramos, the right-handed catcher, arguably the best hitting catcher in baseball this year. And honestly, it's a pretty strong argument to make for him. So him against a left-handed pitcher, I think, is something else we want to look at. And then even Bryce Harper. Bryce is starting to heat up. Lefty on lefty, he's still got really, really good numbers, like a 400 WOBA, ISO over 200. The guy's got so much power. Obviously we prefer him against right-handed pitching, but again, still somebody who's hitting well lefty-on-lefty matchup. So if you're stacking him up, I think you want to have Harper in there because he's one of those guys that does have that upside. Next game we can look at, we got Cleveland at Toronto. R.A. Dickey's on the mound, and I am not a fan of R.A. Dickey right now. I do like this Cleveland team. This Cleveland team's been pounding out some runs. I kind of like all the Indians. You probably have Rajai Davis leading off. He makes some sense to me. Jason Kipnis hitting in the 2-hole. He makes some sense. Lindor in the 3 spot. He makes some sense. You got guys like Carlos Santana and Napoli that have the home run power that I think can take, R.A. Dickey deep, especially in Toronto in the Rogers Center. Very good park for right-handed home run hitting power. So I do think that Dickey's going to get lit up. I think a lot of these Cleveland bats are in play here. On the other side of this game, we got Carlos Carrasco. He's been very tough on both right and left-handed bats. Low fly ball rate, low home run rate. Not somebody you really want to stack up a lot of bats against. Josh Donaldson hits very well in righty-on-righty matchups. Big 390 WOBA guy there. He's 2 for 3 lifetime against Carrasco already with a home run. So he is somebody that's a little bit interesting to me. Edwin Encarnacion, E5. The guy's been absolutely mashing lately. Another guy with pretty good numbers against right-handed pitching. I think he's in like a 380 WOBA range with a 240 ISO or so. 1 of 5 lifetime with a double against Carrasco. So again, Carrasco's been pretty tough. Right-handed bats actually do have a tad higher average against them recently. So I do like Donaldson. I do like E5. Those are the 2 guys with the biggest numbers on this team. I'm not really looking to put a lot of bats on Toronto in my lineup. I do like those 2 big bats, but like I said, Carrasco's probably one of the better pitchers that's on the mound today. I don't know if I'm going to be rolling him out there because he is going up against an offense that could be pretty explosive, but he is one of the guys that has a chance to get you, 25, 35 fantasy point day over on DraftKings. That brings us to the Chicago Cubs at the New York Mets. John Lackey's on the mound for the Cubs. I really don't like Lackey. If you can't tell by my sigh there, this is a guy who's always just he's been above average, but he hasn't been great. This year he's actually been, great. I mean, I guess you can kind of put him in that matchup there. And normally I wouldn't even be looking at him because I don't like him. But man, this is just such a good matchup for him today against the Mets. You look at the Mets team. You want to attack Lackey with lefties. Well, you got Lucas Duda, who's on the DL. You got Conforto, who they sent down to AAA to get his swing into shape. Yesterday, Granderson was a late scratch, so he might be out of the lineup too. You got no David Wright, who's out of the lineup, even though he's a right-handed bat. You're basically looking at, Cespedes in the 3-hole, who hits well in righty-on-righty situations, so he's a viable option. I mean, you got Neil Walker batting cleanup. You got Alejandro De Aza batting up first. You got Asdrubal Cabrera hitting second. You tell me what about the top of that order right there is anything that's going to scare you. So, like I said, I don't really want to use Lackey. He's not a guy that I love, but with the lineup that he's likely to be going up against today, I think he's in a really, really good spot here. Cespedes is a bat that I like, and I guess you can make an argument for Neil Walker, but I mean, that's it. Like, there's really not a lot of stuff on the Yankees. I mean, do you want James Loney? Oh, so, okay, he's another left-handed bat. I guess he's not a horrible option there. You got guys like Brandon Nimmo at the bottom of the order. And, like I said, this Mets team just does not have a lot of pop. I think Lackey is somebody that's in play. I do like Cespedes. I just don't know. I mean, I'm probably not going to have a lot of exposure to these Mets bats here. And as much as I don't want to, I think begrudgingly I will have some exposure to Lackey. On the other side of this game, you got Steven Matz, the young left-hander. Now, he's looked awful in his last start. He was a left-handed pitcher going up against the Atlanta Braves, which is normally money in the bank, but he got knocked around, gave up a lot of hits, gave up a lot of runs, got chased from that game early. Then it comes out during the week that there's, like some kind of bone chip or bone spur in his arm. So whenever you see a guy who you expected to do well in a matchup not do well, then you start hearing about the injury news. It's just a big red flag for me. Now, you throw in on top of it that he's taking on one of the best offenses in the league in the Chicago Cubs today. I just don't think that – I mean, Matz's numbers on paper is going to show you as a guy who could do pretty well in this matchup, but I just don't see him doing that right now. I think that this Cubs team is going to knock him around. You got some big right-handed bats on this team. Ben Zobrist has been pretty good if he's going to be leading off on the top of the order. I like him a little bit. Wilson Contreras, the rookie that they brought up, the catching option, who also plays the outfield for him because they need his bat in the lineup. I mean, you move this kid up into a pretty solid lineup, and he has taken over the 5th spot in that lineup, the 4 or 5 spot in that lineup, almost instantly. So Contreras, definitely somebody else I want. Chris Bryant, big right-handed bat. He actually does better in righty-on-righty situations, but he can hit left-handed pitching too, so he's in there. You look at a guy like Javier Baez, another guy that's very good against left-handed pitching. Even Anthony Rizzo, the lefty. Rizzo's very good in lefty-on-lefty matchups. So if you're going to stack them up on DraftKings, I think you go Zobrist, Contreras, Baez, Bryant, Rizzo, and you got a lot of upside with those 5 guys in your lineup, especially against Matz, especially with Matz being injured and banged up and not 100%. I really like looking at some of these Cubs bats. The last game we can talk about here, we got the Detroit Tigers going up against the Tampa Bay Rays. We got Jordan Zimmerman on the mound. He's basically a little bit of a reverse splits guy. 2016 right-handed bats actually have a higher average against them. If you look back at 2015, 2014, years past, it's normally left-handed bats, though. Tampa Bay has a high K rate against right-handed pitching, and they're not a very good team against the right-handed pitchers. They prefer left-handed pitching is where they hit better, mostly because I don't really love their left-handed bats. You're looking at guys like Brad Miller, Corey Dickerson, Logan Morrison. I mean, none of these guys are guys that I really am scared of or want to have any exposure to in my lineup. So I'm probably shying away from all the bats on Tampa Bay. Like I said, for some reason this year, Zimmerman has been a little bit of a reverse splits guy. So in a tournament, if you want to take like a Forsythe or a Longoria and hope that the reverse split stuff kind of shows, I guess there's a little bit of merit in doing that as low-owned options. But to be perfectly honest with you, neither one of these guys has great numbers against Zimmerman that kind of stood out to me when I was looking through it. So, like I said, I'm not really a big fan of Tampa Bay, not really on any of these bets. On the other side of this game, we got Jake Odorizzi pitching, and he is a very pronounced reverse splits guy and has been for a couple of years. He has a high fly ball rate, but it doesn't really hurt him as much at home in Tampa Bay, for the same reason like we talked about with Taijuan Walker in Seattle. These are not great hitters' ballparks. They're places where fly balls kind of go to die. So I think that's going to be the situation with Odorizzi. I think he'll be okay today, although not great. There are a couple guys that I would be worried about. Miguel Cabrera, 412 WOBA, 221 ISO, 2 for 4 lifetime against Odorizzi. He's the kind of batter, a power right-handed bat that can also hit for average that usually gives Odorizzi a lot of trouble. So I really like Miguel Cabrera in this spot. The only other guy I'm really looking at on this Detroit team, and it's mostly because of price and the upside that he has, is Steven Moya. Yes, he's a left-handed bat, so not the reverse splits that we're looking for, but this guy has huge power upside. 361 WOBA, 240 ISO against right-handed pitching. Like I said, huge power upside going up against a fly ball right-handed pitcher. Moya's just a big dude, man. If he puts one up in the air, there's a good chance it's going to carry and wind up as a home run. So outside of Miggy, I think Moya is probably my second favorite bat on the Tigers if you're looking at, price and projection and what kind of damage the guy can do. And that sums it up for our Benny's Bat section here today at rotocurve.com. Like I said, it's only a small 8-game slate that we have for Thursday night. So, you may want to take a look at it, try to go off the board a little bit. That guys like Bumgarner are going to be really highly owned. So, maybe you look at like a Lackey or a Carrasco there. I think Wei-Yin Chen is the cheap pitching option that I would like today. You got a left-handed pitcher against Atlanta Braves. Always something that you want to try to attack with. And then, like I said, there are some spots here where I'm not touching any of these bats. And there are some other spots here where, I could see myself having 3 or 4 bats from one team in my lineup. So I think it's a good stacking day. I think it's a good tournament day. And hopefully it turns out to be a profitable day for some of you guys. So thank you for joining us here at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.